Hi, welcome to Straight Talk. I want to welcome all of our new Straight Talk viewers in your different cities. We focus on a lot of issues, and lately we've been focusing a lot of our energy on the issue of opiates and heroin and prescription pain pills and the epidemic that's hitting every community in this country, doesn't matter where you live. One of the things that happens when you have an addict is that it impacts their family. It's not just the addict. Everyone says, well, what about the parents? What about the siblings? They say of every addict, there's 6 people who are impacted by their addiction. So today on Straight Talk, we're going to talk about the impact of addiction on families. And joining me is Karen Moore, who is an addictions expert. She works at the Maryland Addiction Recovery Center here outside of Baltimore, but knows the issue better than anyone that I know, and works with families every single day. And thank you for being here.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
I can imagine that with this whole new epidemic going on over the last year or two, I bet you have been swamped.
We have been swamped.
I can only imagine.
Constantly have people coming in. It has not slowed down even the slightest bit. It's picked up more than when I first started working in the field. It's pretty remarkable.
So this opiate crisis is real.
It's very real.
We see a lot on television, but I don't think people really, unless it happens to them.
Right. Unless it happens to you, you tend to think, oh, that's something that happens to other people. It doesn't happen in my family. But then you will meet the families where their addict child or the parent who's an addict, like it's the only one. So they're the anomaly that pops up, and all of a sudden addiction has entered the household and they have no idea what to do.
Yeah, out of nowhere. And do you also see, you've been in this field a long time, that it's not discriminating as far as neighborhoods, or it's not just the city,
it doesn't matter what your socioeconomic status is, it's everyone. It's touching every different facet of life. And I think that is what has made it so much more well known, is that like it's everywhere and everyone being impacted, from the wealthiest population to the people who are lower on the socioeconomic scale.
So when we talk about families, we're really saying that every family is vulnerable to addiction.
Yes.
Which I don't think we've said before.
Yeah.
We've always tried to isolate it. Well, these are the signs and these are anybody.
Yeah, it's anybody. We see,
Scary.
yeah, we see, very, very remarkably different households coming in with identical problems. Even identical parenting styles and things like that, like very similar behaviors presenting no matter what background you come from, and the same kind of like, we don't know what to do with our kid attitude of trying desperately to help them but not seeing any results.
Yeah, I had a parent recently say to me, well, we're going to have to borrow money to send our child to private school because we're worried about the drug problem.
Right.
I said, well, I have a feeling it's probably in the private schools.
It probably is in the private schools too.
Yeah, so it really is everywhere. But do you find that when they get to you, it's probably already a big deal?
I think one of the things is with addiction is that like it's not a big deal until it's a big deal.
Right.
So a lot of the signs and symptoms of the early addiction starting are sort of passed over as experimentation, or if their child's, blacking out or stealing their pain medicine or doing these things that are like clearly indicators of a later problem, they're kind of just like, oh, they're just, they're just being a teenager or whatever age they are. They're just sort of testing things out and not paying attention to the crisis that is literally unfolding in front of them. And by the time they get to us, it's bad. So they don't see it. They don't catch it when it's early. They catch it when like it is hit a proportion that they can't handle anymore.
Do you think that's because many of the parents of today either experimented with pot or drinking, and they knew that, well, this is what teenagers do, and they'll grow out of it?
Right. The problem becomes when they don't grow out of it. And yeah, there is kind of a permissive...
But we're also talking about pain, like you said, narcotic painkillers and heroin and things that I'm sure these parents didn't do.
No, and typically the parents talk about, and I have parents that will talk about I experimented, and like I don't understand what happened with my child, that like I did these things and like they have pursued something completely differently in a different life path than I did, even though I did those things. And I said, that's just because your brain wasn't the same as theirs. You know, they unfortunately, for whatever reason, whether it was genetic or a predisposition or something like that, have developed something that wasn't in your brain chemistry.
So what happens is you've got these kids who are experimenting, parents who, like as you say, are saying, oh, well, he's being a teenager, and then what? They just don't pay attention to when it gets worse?
Well, also, you know, as adolescents or children that are using drugs, hide it. I mean, they go out to the permissive parents' house where like the parents aren't paying attention to what's going on. They'll do things and experiment with these harder drugs in areas that are not visible to the parent that actually might be paying attention. So oftentimes, like the parents are kind of blissfully unaware of what is actually occurring with their child because it's happening at parties, it's happening, you know, in areas that it's not visible to them until it gets to be a massive issue.
We use terms like enabling, you know, and codependent, and these terms that are used. But in the field that you're in, you see the reality of what they are every day. Right. That they do enable and they do think they're doing the best thing. Do you find that most parents are just covering up for what's going on or just blind to what's going on?
I think that they're trying to help. I think they're desperately trying to help. So there's like this homeostasis in your family system. Like you want to keep everything okay. Like we need everything to be okay. And so in paying for things or taking care of legal charges or covering up if there was a consequence at school or whatever, they're trying to make sure everything looks okay so that they don't necessarily, they can stay in the denial that there's a presenting problem occurring. So I think they're trying to help, it's just not effective.
And so they just kind of try to smooth it out.
Right, smooth it out, because if we make it a little bit easier, maybe they'll get better, or maybe this will go away. And the reality is those behaviors are actually creating a protection for the addiction to just continue.
Okay, good start, but we got a lot more to talk about because I want to talk about this parenting, this mother-loving enabling that goes on that I think is real important to talk about. So thank you, Karen. We're talking with Karen Moore. She's an addiction expert at the Maryland Addiction Recovery Center. She knows what she's talking about. If you know anybody that's involved with drugs or alcohol or opiates, get them to watch, pay attention, because when we come back, we're going to really talk about what to do if you think something's going on in your family. Stay with us. We're coming right back to Straight Talk.
Why is Connor having trouble focusing in school?
Having trouble finding Connor's middle school? Would you like directions?
No, why is Connor having trouble focusing in school?
Finding lowest airfare to Istanbul.
No, I'm tired of fighting with him over homework.
Home, walk, restaurant. Need a review?
No, I need help. He's very smart, but his mind wanders. He's disorganized.
I think I understand.
Oh, good.
French fries. Finding best potatoes.
No!
Russet. Fingerling. Yukon Bowl.
Why don't you understand me?
Sorry, I was trying to show how Connor feels every day. Frustrating, isn't it? Redirecting to understood.org.
For the 1 in 5 kids with learning and attention issues, this is what life can feel like. Explore understood.org, a free online resource about learning and attention issues, designed to help your child thrive in school and in life. Understood.org, because understanding is everything.
So they say it's a man's world? Well, I don't see anybody's name on it. While they were out doing their thing, we slowly changed all that. We changed all that! Today, women can do anything men can do. And there's one thing we're even better at.
Hi, welcome back to Straight Talk. We're talking about the opiate crisis. We're talking about addiction. We're talking about the impact that addiction has on the family. You know, you have an addict, but it also impacts everybody else, whether it's the parents or siblings or the children themselves. And joining us is Karen Moore, who is an addictions expert, helping guide us through this. And when we left, we were talking about parents being enablers, you know, and the one thing they always feel is what? If I don't do this,
My child's gonna die.
child's gonna die. Let's talk about that a little bit.
So I'll have parents come to me, and obviously with opiates, overdose is unfortunately a very strong reality, and it happens, I don't even know how many thousands of times a day. And they'll come and they'll be like, if I don't do these things, if I don't continue to try to control or give them somewhere to live or provide them money, or sometimes even give them money for drugs or give them rides or whatever, that if I don't do these things, my child's gonna die. And the one thing I say to them, and because overdoses are so common, so many of our patients have experienced them, I'm like, where was the last one? And they're like, it was in my house. And I'm like, okay, so is it true that you're actually protecting them, or is it the addiction just continuing, and the likelihood is you only have a few minutes? You know, what's gonna happen if you don't do anything, that are you gonna be able to catch it every time? And they are able to wrap their head around the fact that what they're doing is in fact not working, and at some point, like, that reality will happen in their home. Not because they're on the street, you know, if they put them out on the street, don't have any money, it's a lot less likely for them to be able to do what they're doing.
But they feel that they have the power
Yes.
to change.
I'm gonna love
an
them into
addict.
sobriety.
They'll love them to death.
Yeah, I'm gonna love them to death. I mean,
Yeah.
literally that is what happens.
That's what happens.
Yeah.
But they feel they have that power.
Right.
And you see that with spouses, you see that with parents
Yeah.
who really believe that they have that power over an addict, and they don't, do they?
No, because the addiction doesn't care about love. You know, the addict only cares about one thing, and I think the hardest thing is that with the enabling, they're like, if I just give more, if I just love them more, maybe that person that I know from, you know, 5 years ago is gonna reemerge and give me a hug and tell me how much they love me too. And the reality is the addiction is nasty, it's manipulative, it lies, it cheats, it steals, and they don't understand how all these efforts to try to control and change and love don't work. And they get frustrated and they get angry, and then they keep doing it.
There you
And
go.
it becomes a vicious cycle.
That's it. You just did it. That's it. That was beautiful. That was right. That's exactly right.
Yeah,
And these poor parents will sell their house and give up everything.
everything.
And the addict, as you said, they only want one thing, and that's what?
More drugs.
More drugs. And that's what people don't seem to understand.
Yeah,
You know, and we try to, even in some of the programs that are out there and some of the initiatives that are out there, because, I mean, over 64,000 people overdosed in this country, died
yeah,
from opiates. 64,000, it's more than car crashes.
yeah,
And here we are not realizing that the addict just wants more.
that's it. And if you give them more,
They're gonna,
more rides, more money, more this, like, they will keep taking and taking and taking and taking until there is a stop to that sort of cash flow or things that make it easier. So until there's a foot put down and said, like, we are no longer going to tolerate addiction in our home, in our life, in our family, the likelihood is the addict will just continue.
So your suggestion is if parents start seeing the signs, the early signs, whether it's they find paraphernalia or they find drugs, or, you know, they think something's going on, what do you say? Act quick?
Act quick and let them have their consequences.
Okay.
So if they get caught at, you know, having drugs at school and there is some consequence, don't step in and say, like, let me make this easier for you, because it's hard for parents to see their kids struggle. So say they catch a legal charge at, you know, 18 years old, and they're supposed to go off to college, and, you know, oh my God, if we do this, maybe they're not going to go into that, you know, that awesome school that they were so excited about. But you know, like, deep down there's an addiction there. If you rescue them, you are literally stealing them the opportunity to learn from their own pain. And that's what I think parents often struggle with, is that they want to save their kid from pain. And the reality is the only way out of addiction is through the pain, through the consequences, and through really experiencing it yourself.
Right, but a mother's job is to protect their child from pain,
Right.
right?
Right.
And that's the hard part, isn't
Right,
it, of what the
it's-
family has to learn.
Maternal and paternal instincts tell you, like, you protect, you protect, you
Yeah.
protect. So it makes sense that enabling occurs because you're kind of wired to do that. I need to protect my child. The problem with addiction is that it's the completely opposite of what you should be doing. Addiction thrives off of that love, thrives off of that type of care, and will manipulate that kindness into getting what they want.
Yeah, and that's the lesson.
Right.
I mean, that's what we have to educate parents about. And I bet you probably sit with more parents
I sit with
in a
so
week
many.
and have to go through the same little spiel you went through.
It's constant.
Explaining what addiction is. And it's crazy because out in the world, it looks like no one quite understands how powerful this addiction really is.
Right, and they'll get mad at me. Parents will
yeah.
get mad that I'm telling them to do things that are just so painfully difficult. And I'm like, listen, I promise you that, like, if you set a boundary that you probably have never had with this child ever, especially since all of this started, that boundary and holding it will start to teach them that it's like, it'll teach their addiction that, like, oh my God, this doesn't work anymore. So now what do I do?
And so you have to, and this is, I think, the point of what we wanted to talk about, is the fact that addiction is a family problem.
Right.
And so you can't just treat the addict who comes in. If you don't treat the rest of them,
Right, if they go back into the same system that they came from, the likelihood of them having long-term recovery is diminished drastically.
there you go.
Have to treat the whole family because they become just as sick as the addict, and they don't want to look at that.
Yeah. And you'll get some, they'll drop them off and say, I'll pick them up in an hour.
Right, they breathe a sigh of relief, and they're like, oh my God, they're finally going to get better. And I'm like, oh no, and you're finally going to get better too. And that's where families have a hard time. They put so much effort into their loved one's addiction that they're like, why do I have to do work? And I think that's a really important part for parents and loved ones of whether, whatever family member is struggling, to understand is that it's not just the addict that is the problem. They have to get better.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're going to keep talking about this.
Okay.
But that was really tremendous. I think you really capsulized exactly what goes on. And we want to talk a little more about working with these families when we come back. Thank
Okay.
you. We're with Karen Moore talking about this opiate crisis and how addiction impacts the family, and that we have to treat the whole family. And we're learning a lot. So stay with us. We're coming right back to Straight Talk.
Who helps a hero? Who tells the story of their scars? The freedom and safety of so many, of us all, is earned by the sacrifices of so few. Who helps a hero? We all do. The Gary Sinise Foundation works to support America's defenders and strengthen their families through entertainment, the construction of smart homes for our wounded heroes, and by inspiring and educating others to also support the veterans within their own communities. We enjoy the benefits of their sacrifice and service each day. Now it's time we serve them. Find out how you can help our heroes at GarySineseFoundation.org. While we can never do enough to show our gratitude to our nation's defenders, we can always do a little more.
Calls me googly eyes.
You know you're beautiful, right? You know that?
Even you're beautiful. I got bullied for wearing glasses. Share if you're against bullying.
We put it out there, just took off. 3 million people have shared this post. Don't let bullies get you down. I stand with you. Our whole family's wearing glasses. I wear glasses and I'm proud.
I even have the army on my team.
All the kind comments brought my child joy. I don't feel thank you is enough.
That's
Hello, welcome back to Straight Talk. We're learning a lot about the family disease of addiction. And while we go through this opiate epidemic and we start realizing somebody in our family has a problem, the whole family has a problem. And Karen Moore, an addiction specialist, a licensed social worker, she knows this issue. She works at the Maryland Addiction Recovery Center, works with families every single day. And so now at the Maryland Addiction Recovery Center, what do you do with families? I mean, when you get that family in and you say, we got to work with all of you.
Yeah, okay, so when we get a family, we are very, very involved with the family. So every important person that is part of that, I think you had mentioned earlier, like 6 people. Like we generally have around like 6 people, whether it's parents or children, or it can be a number of different people. And basically talking to each of them, getting their own background, their own interpretation of the situation, what behaviors they've engaged in to sort of help facilitate the addiction to continue, what they think they need to change, and just sort of getting a basis of understanding of like how sick did this family become as a result of the addict in it. And so we sort of gauge like how they operate. We have some, some mothers where it's almost as if, mothers and fathers, it's almost as if they are as stunted as the addict. So addict begins using at 15. Parents come in with a 25-year-old heroin addict and they are still talking about this child as if they're 15. So it's almost like as the family gets stunted at the same age that that child started using. Their parenting didn't ever change. And so there's this level of care and desire to fix. I remember I had, I've parents try to send coats and clothing, and I'm like, your child can figure out how to get, a winter jacket.
Right.
And they're 30.
Right.
So I think, we really start to really get an evaluation of them, especially in my first session, to figure out like how much illness has infiltrated themselves and their need for recovery, and like pointing them in the direction of Al-Anon or Nar-Anon, and like getting them resources, parent support groups, and getting them connected with other people that are experiencing the same thing is really important.
Yeah. So again, you're working with both of them.
Yeah.
With the whole family, with each member of the family.
Right. I usually separate out the patient and the family to start.
Because when you're done with the addict, in the sense of the time that they spend in treatment, they have to go back somewhere.
Right.
So relapse, aftercare is critical as well.
Right. A lot of what we will tell people, in our treatment center, we have a community living component. So the patients live in apartments that we have, and which is really helpful because a lot of times, they're like, I've kept their bed, it's all made, it's ready for them to come home, and I'm like, they probably, they're 25, like it's time that they leave. And really getting them to realize that in constantly trying to help, they are actually creating a sense of dependence with their child to not grow up. Yeah. And that's what addiction does, it makes people not grow up. And so what we are trying to help them do is for them to start seeing their addicted child as the age they actually are, and to push them into the direction of the independence, and both emotionally and financially and everything. That hasn't happened.
That enabling of the parents, that they get so caught up in it that they want the addict to stay connected to them.
Yes.
Because then they love me, they need me.
They need me.
Right. And that's
that
the vicious cycle.
That is a vicious cycle.
Yeah.
So they feel when all of a sudden the addict gets healthy and they say, hey, mom and dad, like, I'm going to set a boundary with you. I'm not going to call you every day. I've got to figure out my own life. I got to find my own direction.
I don't need you as much anymore.
And they've put so much effort into saving this person that they're like, well, how are you abandoning me now?
Yeah.
And they can ultimately do self-sabotaging of the entire situation, not even realizing it.
So now you're dealing with aftercare.
Yes.
So, you've worked with the addict, you've worked with, now it's time for them to go into the world, to the job and do this, and that has to continue.
Right.
And you like Al-Anon and the support groups are very important.
Here's the thing, is when it's in the family, it tends to be pretty secretive. So no one wants to say, hey, I have a heroin addict son or daughter or parent or sibling. Like, no one wants to do that. And so it becomes a family secret. So you also see like a sibling suffer. So as the addict is getting all the attention, the sibling is totally deprived and neglected of their own concerns and issues. They stop talking. They feel absolutely resentful towards the addict. And you have this sort of sick dynamic that's starting to come up. So it's really important for people to get that support and talk to other families that have experienced the same thing and get information from sometimes healthier families about what to do. sometimes it comes from a different place when they hear it from someone who's actually going through it than when they hear it from a therapist.
But that's critical, and that goes on. That doesn't.
No, that is
you just
your
keep
recovery
doing
process.
That because,
yeah.
because again, the addict is going to go out on their own. They're going to hopefully, move on and keep staying sober and clean and not have to need mommy and daddy.
Right.
But mommy and daddy have to move on too.
Have to be ready to let go.
Yeah.
And that's one of the hardest things, is that they have, as much as they dislike what has been happening, they also get almost in a way very addicted to it. So their emotional satisfaction in life is dependent on whether or not our child's doing okay. And then when the child is doing okay, then they don't know who they are anymore.
Yeah.
That's the work.
For the people watching from all over the country that are watching and saying, well, this is me, and we think we have a problem, should they find a program that offers a family program, that
Yes,
offers support for the parents, or they should go to a Naranon or a meeting?
I would say all of the above.
All the above.
Yeah, I mean,
no matter
I think
where you are.
any treatment center that offers family work is a must. If it does not offer family work, then you're missing a really, really, really critical component to the treatment process for the addict and for themselves. So I would say do as much as you can to get support and to get yourself healthy.
Yeah, and not be embarrassed by the whole thing.
Right. I mean, it is such a huge problem. I mean, I will talk to people, and it's amazing that, people in my own life that I'll mention things to are like, oh yeah, I have an uncle who had addiction, or I had this person who had addiction. It is touching so many people and it's also breaking the stigma. Like, it's a disease. At the end of the day, it's a disease, and the more we talk about it, the more people come out of the shadows and say, you know what, I have a problem, or my son has a problem, or my daughter has a problem. The more we make it something that's okay to talk about, the more likely we're going to stop having so many people dying.
Because, I mean, every day you hear, I mean, the phone calls, the stories of people who are, just, going through this.
I can't tell you how many patients I've had.
Yeah.
So.
But making that call,
Yes.
getting that support, and staying involved in the treatment as a family.
As a family.
And going through it as a family is critical.
Right.
And I think that's something that I think hopefully we're pounding away here.
Yes.
To get families out there to realize, like you say, break the stigma. It's okay.
It's okay.
Ask for help.
Yeah. It's, I think that's the biggest thing, like, make the call. As soon as you make the call, your secret's out, and there is relief in that.
Listen, I can't thank you enough. Great, great information. Terrific. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Karen Moore with the Maryland Addiction Recovery Center. She knows what she's talking about. Every month here on Straight Talk, we try to focus in on this heroin, this opiate epidemic, try to give you some information, educate you in the public, and tell you how to access resources. The rest of it is up to you. If you know someone or yourself is involved with drugs or alcohol, you need help, please make that call. Get help for yourself or your loved one, and hang in there. We wish you only the best. And I want to thank Karen for being with us. Thank you for watching Straight Talk, and we'll see you next time.